Hi, welcome to session 8 of Sociology and Cultural Studies, and we'll be looking at work and economic life in this session. And we'll basically look at what work is, the different categories of work, the rationale for work, and then we'll look at also the gender stratification and division of labor among women and men, or boys and girls, and its implication. So let's begin with some introductory insights. So definitely in life, in any economic in any economy or in any society, work is part of people's lives, and of course it is inevitable because it's what keeps people living. So and therefore in any culture, work is the basis for any economic life, the basis for all living, or so that is why how far important work is for any society, regardless of the stage of development or social change, whether it is for hunting and gathering, or to postmodern, or industrial, or involve work, because the whole aim is looking at production and distribution of goods and services that are geared by institutions. And of course, these institutions are the ones that make up the economic system, of which the economic system is a whole frame engineered by the work, everyday work. But of course, institutions may vary from culture to culture or from society to society. So, but again, bottom line is that work is part of any society. So, what is work then? It could be looked at as a process of carrying out tasks or activities which involve expenditure of mental or physical effort. So anything that involves expenditure of effort, mentally or physically, then that is work. Could be any activity or done for the purpose of achievement of any sort of outcome. And of course, again, for guidance, the whole objective for expending that mental or physical effort is to produce goods and services that can cater for our needs as human beings. So that is work. So you think about what you do every day, whether home or at school or anything that involves physical or mental effort. Of course, one would ask, wait, isn't then is resting part of work? Yes, it is. Resting is part of work because it's part of the process of production. So we have the two categorical the categorical portions of work. So you have paid and unpaid work, of which paid work has to do with any occupation or any tasks that is done in exchange for regular salary or wage, and this is mostly done in informal settings. So think about what you do to earn a living, in terms of course, where you're paid, or uh, whether in your community or any organization that you are working in. So that is paid work. But there is also unpaid work, which is mostly in the informal sector, and it is usually done for self provisioning. And of course, this for paid work, you could one can choose not to do it, but for unpaid work, that is inevitable, because it's what everyone is bases on to survive. Okay, so it's the every other hour work done to survive in any society. So the unpaid work is not usually, of course, captured by in statistics, let's say national statistics, but it is very important because it's on that basis that everyone lives. So before even one prepares to go to do paid work, they somehow get involved in unpaid work. Yeah, so that's how it is. So work and idleness, of course, Second Thessalonians, if we are to look at it from the Christian or biblical perspective, and even Proverbs itself says that the plans of the diligent or hardworking lead to profit as surely as of course, haste leads to poverty. So, in that case, working is very important if we do not want to experience poverty in our own lives. So, think about all those implications that come with poverty. So, to avoid those, then therefore, one must work. So that brings us to the rationale for working, or one would ask why do people work? Of course, work is economic and social, and it is part of any part of life. So that's the essential basis. It's part of everyday life. But of course, some also work to transfer energy. Others work as an objective to produce goods and services. Of course, mainly that's the aim of paid work, even unpaid work, that we produce goods and services to cater for our needs in order to survive as human beings. So, work is also a prime factor for change in society. Prime factor for change. Remember, we talked about social change. Social change equated to development. So, think about all those dimensions of development: economic, social, psychological, or political. All those dimensions involve some level of work, because without work, then those wouldn't be realized. In terms of development or social change. But of course, people also work to earn. We talked about paid work that involves exchange of salary or wage. So people work for earnings, of which earnings can be used for basic needs or again in preparation for future needs. So people work to accumulate assets and capital, so that in the near future they have more than what they need to cater for their survival, even for the next generations. If, for instance, we are to look at sustainable development, okay. So there is also working activity level that has to do with exercising skills and capacities. For instance, in terms of knowledge, uh, you work for instance, pass knowledge and skills for others. Then there is, of course, the whole idea of co-creating and procreating, working to produce variety in life. Therefore, application of different sorts of technology to produce different kinds of goods and services that our changing society requires. But of course, also there is temporal structure in terms of working gives a sense of direction and planning for daily routine. So before you wake up, you go to sleep, you usually think about how the next day is going to be. So that in that case, work becomes a purpose for life, or gives you sense of direction and planning for your own current and future plans. So we just previously talked about work from the as part of working to produce goods and services. And when we talk about production of goods and services, then we are definitely looking at economics. So in that case, work is the main pivot for economic systems. So in that case, would look at the different economic systems, which would broadly look at socialism or capitalism, or in other words, um, communism versus capitalism. So in capitalistic economic system, you have few owners who are the rich, and many workers who are the peasants or poor. So the rich own resources and control them, and therefore employ or have workers to do production of goods and services for the fewer who own resources. So the owners will always, of course, manipulate and exploit the workers because for they have their own interests. In that case, of course, to continue producing or accumulating more wealth, of which wealth comes with particular status and privileges. In the socialism, the government owns resources and controls them, but again, for the benefit of all citizens in that case. So also think about communities that own bigger chunks of land as communities. So land that is used by everyone in that community. So that could also relate to socialism. Of course, partly this is also practiced in um, China, Tanzania, and other categories of other kinds of countries, including I think North Korea also. But for capitalistic economies are more could the dominant ones apparently because of individual and citizen liberties. So you also have types of economies. You have the primary economy, which deals with extraction of raw materials, and therefore that has to do with, for instance, mining and so on. Then you have secondary. Uh, 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 so primary does not only do with mining, but also again, if you think about agriculture, you produce your produces are sold so that they can go and be processed, and those can be processed in the secondary economies that deal with manufacturing and production. So think about industries and factories and so on. Then you have tertiary that deal with finished goods and services. Think about textiles and so and then those that deal with merchandise, selling merchandise that have been processed from factories. Okay, so then you have postmodern that deal with sophisticated technology to produce services. So a good example would be, for instance, think about primary. Think about, let's say, coffee. Raw coffee lies in the primary economy, which is agriculture, and then coffee is exported or taken into factories for processing. That is secondary economy, and then when it is processed, it is packed, and then there are outlets or other outlets that sell or deal in the finished products of coffee, which is, for instance, processed coffee, and then so you could think of those. You could think of coffee moving through those different categories of economies. Postmodern, for instance, deals with production of technology and of course to produce services. Think about the telecommunication companies and so on, or automobile companies. Then you have so the economic systems and work, just like I said before, um, Work is fundamental to any economic system because if you think about, for instance, these economies that we've talked about, if without work, that coffee garden wouldn't be in existence. Without work, the factories would not process the coffee. Without work, the tertiary that deals with processed coffee in terms of selling it wouldn't exist. So work, in other words, is part of the economic system. It is the basis or fundamental. It's the essential aspect of the economic system. And of course, the economic system of any culture relates to institutions that provide for production and distribution of goods and services. And of course, again, just like I said from the beginning, um, like I said from the beginning, all cultures, different societies, in different societies, work is the basis for the economy and survival of all members, regardless of whatever culture you have, or any society that you have, whether it is developed or not developed economies. And of course, the economy influences all other parts of the society, and therefore the social reproduction of any aspects in general within society. Uh, we've talked about the idea of production of goods and services as the main aim for work. But again, that production of goods and services relies on a body of knowledge that is used by people in any culture, of course, to meet particular needs, and that is technology. And of course, this has to do much with work in that case. So the more the advanced the tech, the higher the rate of production, and again, the easier the work it becomes. So if you have more robots, if you have high level of technology, then you can design robots that could help in production of goods and services, and therefore making work a little bit easier. Of course, high technology comes with consequences of unemployment, but it is needed to make things to make work easier and faster in that case. So there is also the idea of multi-skilling, which has to do with the division of labor and cross-disciplinary or cross-functional in terms of uh, um, work and production. So it is important in easing work and also achieving our intended purposes when you talk about multi-skilling. Uh, Multi-skilling could be in terms of, let's say, for example, you are an engineer, but you can also teach engineering, and therefore helping transfer that knowledge to other categories. But also, you are a father in that case, again, multi-skilling as a father, an engineer, but also a professor in a certain university. So, or think about women, a woman who is working but also has to take care of children, but again has to also maybe cultivate or go to the garden to dig. That is multi-skilling, and it is very important to ease production of goods and services. So now that we know about the economic work and systems, therefore, can we then relate work, poverty, and wealth? Yes. So the biggest question then that one might ask is whether purposes of work directed to capital accumulation uh, and wealth are indeed essential. Of course, the question would be, okay, what does it take to create or have wealth? Does it require one to work so hard and relentlessly, or in some cases there are people who do not even need to work so much but they would accumulate wealth? Yeah, so of course it depends on one's status, one's privileges, and of course their position in particular status. So think about again social stratification and class, um, and class systems. So where you have some people have particular ascribed status that actually renders them live a wealthy life, while others must work to achieve particular statuses through different classes in that case. So, uh, but all in all, whether it is achieved or ascribed status, there is some level of work. But of course, because of our different societies, you'll find that some people indeed do not need to work so much to accumulate wealth, because wealth is already there. But of course, there are other systems that would help them to accumulate such wealth. For instance, within the estates systems, yeah, you'll find, of course, those who own resources then have many workers who are indeed working for them to accumulate that wealth. So work can help us to create change, which is development in this case, in our societies, and the change itself influences our work. So the more you develop, the more work that is needed to keep developing. So without work, wealth cannot be attained unless people live on expense of others' efforts and rewards. So think about corruption and so on. So key questions in that case would be: are we appropriately creating change? Are we appropriately developing? In other words, as a result of our works, who benefits from social change or cultural change that results from work? Of course, considering the issues of inequalities and the many poor people who work for the rich individuals, the rich individuals who are certainly few in our societies. And again, how are resources used, or and how to achieve particular outcomes or benefits. How efficient and effective is the change? Is change beneficial or not? And of course that brings us to the idea of equity and equality, social justice versus equal opportunities, and so on. So the question would be there, would be whether work and change really help everyone to escape poverty in our societies. And of course, that is not true considering our stratified class systems in our societies, where those who are more privileged continue to get more developed, while those who are poor continue to get more poorer because of certain levels of exploitation by those who are powerful and privileged. So, so when we talk about equality and equity and social justice, then that brings us to the idea of gender and work. That of course work is contextual and therefore varies from culture to culture and again society to society. And in our own communities, we do specialize in specific works. So that kind of specialization and division of labor definitely matters a lot for any economic system, because it specifies who does what and when, where, how, why, and for what benefits at the end. So in that case, of course, in most societies, then you have this idea of gender, these distinctions between males and females. There I'm talking about boys and girls, men and women. How our cultures have defined or define what we must do as boys and girls, or women and men. So gender has to do with socially constructed roles and responsibilities, and I will talk about the reproductive roles and productive roles and community roles in a moment. Gender also has to do with opportunities in terms of access to education or employment, and again, employment has to do with work. Or it also has to do with the distinctions or socially constructed benefits in terms of income, of which income, for instance, is as a result of work, or social dividends, or health. Those are services also resulting from work, or socially constructed expected behaviors in terms of decision making. Take an example of whether a woman should go to work or not, or whether she should earn a living or not. And of course, access and control over resources such as land, of which those are resources that everyone require to perform particular activities, as totals to work. So these again, of course, associated with being a male or female. So in our societies, there are expected roles that men and women must do, um, and therefore those sometimes bring an equal balance. They bring about inequalities in terms of who does what and when, or who gets paid for particular activities or not. And you'll find that mostly most of the unpaid work is done by women, considering that most of the unpaid work is done at household level. So think about that. Just think about what your mother or your grandmother or your other women in the community or girls do compared to men, what they do at household level. um, and then think about who does more of the paid work and unpaid work. Of course, things have changed, that women are also now shifting towards working in the formal sector, rather than concentrating themselves in the informal sector. But we are going to look at that in a moment, the implication of that in a moment. So gender itself shapes one's life choices, and therefore one's roles in the home, in society, but also in the economy. And you'll find that female and male roles or behaviors or expectations are socially constructed, and therefore sometimes turn into gender inequalities in terms of division of labor, and in terms of decisions of regarding the kind of work that must be done. Um, so, of course, when we talk about gender inequalities, the opposite is the gender equality, which relates to also having both men and women having similar opportunities in life, including ability to participate in public sphere, where, of course, most of the paid work can be found. So then if we look at gender inequalities, then we'll be looking at also in association with work and family. And of course, there are differences and inequalities between women and men in terms of responsibilities assigned, as I just said, and in terms of work that is undertaken, but also in terms of who controls particular resources such as income, or land, that can be used to do work. And so fundamental opportunities in the development of any individual and society are of course established and are based on what our society expect us to do. So you'll have, at the end, you'll have those inequalities within society, which sometimes may lead to underdevelopment, because some other aspects are giving opportunities to some individuals, while other individuals are not getting such privileges. So that brings us to the gender roles, which vary depending on different cultures. The roles define defined for women in Europe or in developed countries or in the US may a little bit differ from the roles defined for women in our African traditional societies, and of course, often conditioned by household structure and access to and control of over resources. Because we need those resources to do the work that or roles that we have been ascribed to do. There are different categories of gender roles. One of them is a productive role, which has to do with activities that look at caregiving or childbearing or also household management. Then you have, and of course, mostly those are done by women. Then you have, and again, mostly they are unpaid work. Then you have productive roles that do with income generating activities and therefore has much to do with paid work, and in most cases done by men. But of course, like I said before, things, because of social change, women now can also move outside houses and go to work in the formal sector, considering that they can also actually now do study and gain skills to apply in the formal sector. You realize that now, for instance, at university levels, you have more women studying than men. So of course, that in the result of that is that you'll have more women also getting engaged in the economic sector, where they can be paid. Then the other category is community management roles, which are mostly voluntary, but has to do with taking care of the community or maintaining the community welfare. Think about church work or water source management and so on. And you have also, in this case, both men and women participating. But of course, the shift of women were doing shift of women from working solely at household level also join the economic sector. That comes with what we call the triple burden, because women must do all the three, participate in all the three activities heavily, and therefore bring about role strain. So in that case, so you have heavy workload of women, and the many overlapping tasks. So workload that consists of unpaid reproductive roles, the paid productive role, and also the economic management roles, and all other work that is necessary for survival of the community. That at the end, if for instance this work was totaled up or computed in terms of hours, it may even be more than 24 hours, that you'll find that in that case women could indeed be working for 24 hours also. So that's the triple burden that we're looking at when it comes to women and work. So you have time to read this to capture what we've just talked about in terms of triple burden. So you have women's traditional roles, especially if she is a wife and a mother, and is to stay home, manage the household, take care of the family. But however, of course, because of the economic realities, more and more women have joined the labor force. Yet, even as they spend even essentially the same working hours as men outside the home, household work and care are still primarily women's concern. And of course, as a result, women carry a particular triple burden of such different roles in terms of longer hours and a wider scope of responsibility. So they are also expected to participate in socio-economic activities or social cultural activities within, such as in church or civic organizations or other community involvement, but also women's work in the home, in the labor force, and in the community is in that case becomes a multiple burden that is not experienced by men. So such changes, particular social changes, must be made, considering that now we have more women doing both informal and formal work that is paid and unpaid. So because of such burdens and so on, and because we have some women not working, that coins brings us to the concept of feminization of poverty. That you'll find in most societies, the most majority of people who are poor are women and children compared to men. But of course, mainly because of culturally based causes of poverty, such as patriarchy, where you have male dominance, but where you also have traditional gender division of labor that is unfair, and therefore giving much of work to women, just as we have just talked about. So notice changes, of course, like I had said earlier, have happened in terms of cultural settings and economic systems, but of course challenges still manifest or remain in societies, and you have women who still have less benefits from the work, the so much work they do in our communities. So again, so bottom line is that work has been or is still and will always be part of our everyday life, regardless of the society you're living in, or any culture that you have, and the need to work to meet everyday needs, or to survive, and then create more needs, is again with us, that we must work. So changes are necessary again to create equality in terms of access to work and benefits, especially among men and women. But also this could also relate to changes in trying um, to promote more paid work for workers. So this could happen in terms of let's say the state establishing minimum wage policies that would necessitate that, or would reduce exploitation of poor people by the rich people who own resources. So everyone's efforts need to be recognized and rewarded in that case, and therefore cultural and social changes are necessary in any economic system. So here you have some reading resources that could help you to understand more about this topic, and that marks the end of this session. Thank you.